ET Infra, we will be in a conversation with Mr. Shadab Siddiqui, partner at YCP Auctus, a leading consulting firm which specializes in the infrastructure sector. With Mr. Siddiqui, we will explore the aspect of transit-oriented development, a concept which now the government and others in the infrastructure are exploring, and how it will augur well for the Indian urban mobility landscape. The revenue model around India's metro system, how it has worked over the years, and what is the potential of augmenting the non-fare revenue segment for India's metro systems. Aspects such as the introduction of public-private partnership in India's metro network, whether it has augured well, is also something we will be exploring and discussing about. So, Mr. Shadab, thank you very much joining out here at ET Infra. These are, virtual video series that we keep on doing with stakeholders out here in the infrastructure sector, and really appreciate you joining us out here for today. Before we sort of, broadly begin and take your inputs for the broader India infrastructure sector, about YCP Actus, if you could, give us a brief in terms of its origin and which are the areas you are engaged in.
Yeah, so YCP is a global management consulting firm. We are present in about 20 plus countries, and the India arm of it is called YCP Auctus. We are a full service management consulting firm across strategy development, implementation support, transaction advisory, etc. Just to give you a sense of the scale, about 120 million US overall revenues, and in India about 100 crore INR plus. We are sector agnostic, which means we do projects across sectors. A large part of it is related to transactions, related to urban infra, and all kinds of transit and transport infrastructure. So that's a quick background of what we are about.
Right. I've been told that you specialize in terms of your focus is rather on the railway sector out here in India, and I think broadly other allied sectors as well. So if you could give us a brief in terms of, I think the metro systems obviously over the years, over the decades have sort of, really solidified, whether it's starting from Delhi and then now going to many other cities. How do you see that aspect of the urban mobility, go forward? Because these are extensive networks and do require extensive level of funding. So how do you see those aspects?
Correct. So our transit in a larger form is a core area of practice, which includes airports. It includes rail related transit networks, including metro and rapid rail, etc. Right, and we also have a large highway practice. So across all of this, we call it transit or transportation, and that is a key area of focus for us. In terms of specifically, you spoke about transit, rail, and metro, right? And how do we see this going forward? So what we have seen is that, and I'm just talking about global best practices and maybe cite some examples from Hong Kong and Tokyo, where all transit projects are tied up with some real estate projects, which is called transit-oriented development, TOD, right? And right at the conceptualization stage, they tie in TOD with the transit project. And without that, the project is not even sanctioned. So the project viability and operational viability is actually ensured from day one when the project is conceptualized. In India, the way transit projects are looked at is that it is a passenger convenience. It's an essential service to be provided, and it is largely government funded through multilateral agency funding from overseas. And all the other aspects like TOD and all are an afterthought, right? They come in the picture when the project commences, the construction is on, and in some cases it is operationalized. And which is why we will see that project viability is always a big issue as far as metro and transit rail is concerned. So I think going forward, that change of mindset needs to happen, right? There's a limit to how much debt funding can be taken up by the states and the center. And project viability from day one has to be ensured. And maybe a TOD kind of an approach to that is the way to go.
Right. I think if I broadly, speak about, especially in the Delhi region, Delhi NCR region, at Karkarduma area of, part of East Delhi, I think TOD development is something that have really focused on, at least the Delhi government and the metro systems. But by and large, I wanted to really sort of understand in the Indian context, and you are definitely talking about major cities or the extension of such cities. How do you see the TOD model sort of coming in? We have not experimented much with it, but your take as to how does the Indian cities augur well for those?
So yeah, you're right, absolutely. There are some cities and some transit networks who've experimented with that and have achieved some reasonable success, right? And the TOD is essentially a means of raising finance to make the project and operations viable. So Delhi, to some extent, Bangalore, Mumbai, Chennai, they've all attempted that. So again, the question comes back to how can we tie all of this at the conceptualization stage itself, right? So that the financing through the TOD efforts comes much before in the project life cycle. Right now, all of this is coming much later in the life cycle. If we can prepone it and bring it right at the conceptualization stage, it will be easier to design projects, plan and implement projects. So I think, and all authorities are thinking about it. It's a very current issue, and in various forums this has been spoken about. And I think that is the route this or the thought process that people will take going forward.
Right. And also on this particular aspect as well, this synergies between the different government authorities and then obviously the private sector, which obviously comes in later on, much more vital aspect. Because I think the way at least the Delhi metro system has sort of worked, it is that from the interior of the city, then it has extended to the periphery of the other states. But that has been largely sort of a initiative taken by the Delhi metro itself. And obviously other players have come in later on.
No, absolutely. And you're right, there are different authorities responsible for different aspects of it, which requires a lot of coordination and integration among the authorities. There is some talk of having a nodal urban transport kind of an authority so that there is better synchronization of all the plans and the implementation. So essentially what this means is that a lot of initial approvals are received quickly. The project can kickstart quickly, even during the land acquisition and implementation phase, things can be expedited because the more the project phase is stretched, the more pressure comes on the viability of the project, right? So the quicker you do it, the more viable or more chances of the project being viable. So during the construction phase and even during the operationalization phase, if there's a nodal authority across a region, let's say NCR, I'm based out of Mumbai. So let's say the MMR region, if there can be a nodal authority for this, yes, that will really enhance the viability of the project itself.
Right. Sticking on to the metro system in the country as well. Uh, there was a time, back a few years back, where there was a lot of hope in terms of sort of applying the PPP model into the metro system. The L&T, they started it with the L&T Hyderabad network, but it hasn't gone well. It hasn't gone well for L&T itself, and this is something that the government also hasn't had a good experience. I really wanted to understand if one could assume that PPP is a no-go area when it comes to the metro systems, which is very crucial for as a public transport system, whichever city it comes up, or there are ways that the model contract between the private player and the government can be worked in such a way that can still hope for a PPP in metro systems or other urban transport systems.
No, you're absolutely right. While PPP has worked well in, let's say, aviation in airports, right? It's a more mature kind of model, and it started much earlier in the early to mid 2000s. But urban transport in terms of rail and metro, specifically metro, RRTS, monorail, light rail, all these other forms of urban transport. It started with Delhi Metro, and then obviously things have played out from there. Um, at some point, the governments realized that we can't just finance all of this on our own. We need to have a private participation, and then obviously there were firms like Larsen and Toubro, Tata's, Reliance Infrastructure, all of them taking up opportunities like this. And PPP obviously takes various shapes, right? So here we are talking about developing and operating a metro, what is called the DBFOT type, right? Where the private player essentially takes on the financing and the capex of the project, which is the high risk area, right? The later in the project life cycle, the risks go down. Earlier on, there's a lot of regulatory risk, financing risk, etc., right? So one way, and I understand that after doing a little bit of a PPP, that has died down in a way in this space, and it is no longer being looked at. And again, it's back to government raising financing on its
Right.
own. Now, uh, one of the reasons for this is just the balance of risk reward sharing between the public participant and the private participant, right? What I understand in the current models is that a lot of uncontrollable risks are with the private player. I'll give you an example. Let's say if there is delays in commissioning of the metro, the
Okay.
project and construction phase stretches, right? So there is no way to get some uh, to make the future revenues enhance so that this is compensated for. All those measures are not there contractually. Second, ridership risk. Ridership risk is largely taken on by the transit operator and the developer. And at the time of project conceptualization, a certain ridership is envisaged, and we have seen how it has played out, right? The actual ridership is significantly lower than what was planned. So that ridership risk is on the developer, the project risk in terms of land acquisition, construction, dealing with various authorities. These are all what we say non-controllable risks, which is with the PPP, the private part of the PPP. Now, and all of this is played out in various projects, and which has significantly reduced the attractiveness of the project itself, the long delays in construction and the ridership just about picking up in some of these. So I think the way forward in PPP, if we have to get more private participation in such projects, is to have a balance of the risk reward, right? At least some of the non-controllable risks have to be structured in such a way that it makes it viable for a private player to participate in it. And there are examples from other sectors like aviation that can be looked at to make this model more sustainable.
True. I think, and to be very honest, I think we can just not sort of highlight the what has happened in the metro segment. Even in the railways, a couple of years back, there was this whole effort of bringing in private players who could give passenger services. But because of the role of the dominant role of the Indian Railways itself, and without the presence of an independent regulator, I think that aspect also did not see the light of the day. Although we are being told that I think the government will probably look at tinkering with that around again and then sort of start off anew, sort of bringing in the private sector. Uh, I really want to understand, in terms of you did talk about the risk reward between the private player in the metro system. Uh, what has happened over the years? It's with the success of the Delhi Metro also, there has been a sort of a demand from, let's say the politicians at different cities or different states to sort of have a replica of the Delhi Metro sort of a system in their own, let's say, cities or states. But the pertinent fact is that the Delhi metro system, it's a very intensive, capex oriented sort of a structure or a network. And there are other, urban transport systems very similar to the metro, which are being sort of talked about, the light metro systems and the others. I just really wanted to understand from you, would be prudent for many of the Indian states, be it the tier three, tier two and tier three, as you really enunciated that, sometimes the ridership may not be up to the expectation. to actually go for a much more simpler model of urban transport, be it a light rail or any similar systems, which will be much more conducive for cities like Tier 2 or Tier 3.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I had attended a talk by Dr. Sridharan, and he also said that metro is not practical for a lot of tier 2 and tier 3 cities at all. It's a very expensive infrastructure to have. And unless you are able to tie it up like a Hong Kong does, right, where you are bundling it with real estate and
No.
TOD, or you are assessing your ridership potential very accurately, all of that, unless that happens, it's not the most pragmatic model. In fact, a lot of tier 3 cities can just do with many more bus routes, right?
No.
Bus infrastructure is also public infrastructure, and it serves the purpose. And you don't have to create massive infrastructure. You just need a fleet. And somewhere in between are the tier 2 cities, right? Where you are looking at the neo metro or the neo light model, which is being spoken about. Yes, the capex is lower, the passenger carrying capacity is lower, the size of the physical infrastructure is smaller. It's a more efficient way of doing it. So yes, you're right. The way forward is the large cities would maybe want the metro, but it has to be tied in with the TOD to make it efficient. The tier 2 cities would go with this light rail kind of a model, which is called the neo light and so on. And the tier 3 cities would do well just to augment their rapid bus kind of network, right? So yeah, there has to be a proper feasibility and a viability which has to be done when these are conceptualized. And what needs to be avoided is to use it as a as a poll promise, right? Like we're getting the metro to the city, as in we should authorities should refrain from doing that. Essentially, it is going to burden the city itself in terms of servicing all the debt that comes along with it.
On this one only, I really wanted to have your view. Does a TOD model then does it work around systems like a light metro or a mini metro, or the TOD system is only conducive for the likes of the systems like the Delhi Metro or the ones coming up at Mumbai?
No, so TOD is about integrating real estate with transit, right? So let's say there is a railway station or a metro station or even a light rail station.
Mm.
Can we create some real estate around it or over it, which is called air rights over the station itself? So there are many examples of it which Delhi Metro has commissioned. There are some examples in Bangalore, in Mumbai as well. Chennai is doing some projects like that. So whether that transit station is a bus terminal, whether it's a light rail station, a metro station, a railway station, which is a major hub, this real estate can be attached to that. There are examples in Mumbai where I am, where bus terminals are associated with TOD and developments. It could be commercial, which is like office or retail. It could be residential, or it could be mixed use development, right? Depending on the nature of that location. So yeah, TOD can be looked at across various types of transit.
Right. As a matter of fact, if I'm not wrong, even with the new station redevelopment concept, I think TOD plays a very important aspect. I think that is the entire, they are trying to model it around it. And given the fact that with the railways, the kind of, footfalls they draw in and the kind of, right being located at the center of many of our cities, that actually, it's a very good example or potential of a TOD development.
You're absolutely right. In fact, the government has done a fairly good job with the station redevelopment. There are lots of examples across India where the private participant is developing the upgraded version of the station and the enhanced version of the station, right? Because capacity increases and there's upgradation of services and everything else. So, but yes, there has to be um, like there is a regulatory authority in other areas, because wherever there is PPP, there is need for governance and there is need for transparent regulation and so on, right? So I think some of those things have to be put in place so that when things go right, it's all okay. But then when things go wrong, then it gets into a lot of other issues like litigation, arbitration, projects are stuck, things are not able to proceed, and so on. So there has to be quick redressal of some of the issues that come up. And if there is a proper authority overseeing all of this, I think that will go a long way in simplifying um, relationships between various stakeholders in a project like this.
Right. You mentioned that you're based out of Bombay. Bombay, I'm the way it is looking into the coming years will see an extensive network of metros. One underground stretch has already come up, and there are several other networks of on ground or over the ground metro networks that are coming up. Your take, the way you see the city evolving, and obviously major infrastructure projects and transportation projects are going up. How do you see Bombay's landscape changing in terms of the new metro systems or the underground systems, and then when the coastal road is now operational, how you see that sort of this Bombay's landscape changing?
Yeah, it will change significantly, right? 10 years from now, we are hoping for a very efficient, seamless kind of transport network in not just the main city, but in the extended areas of Mumbai as well.
Right.
Um, so I think what is critical is the way it is being planned is that in any direction you go 1 kilometer to 1.5 kilometers, there's a metro or some kind of a urban transport node which is planned, right? What is important is that from a passenger perspective, when I leave my house and I reach my office or my destination, I am concerned about my end-to-end time, right? So right now, what happens in a lot of use cases is that while just the journey time, if you compare, the metro is faster or the public transport is faster, but if you look at the end-to-end time, it's almost takes the same amount of time, and in some cases much more. So what is important is the multimodal integration and the last mile connectivity, right? So when I step out of the house, and we've seen people experiment with e-bikes and e-scooters and all of that. I think we have to go back to a traditional mindset where feeder buses across the transit
Mhm.
network, auto stands, which are well designed, well planned. It's not very far away from the entry exits. It's easier for me to just get off one and get onto the other. Even in terms of how these various lines and railway lines and metro lines and monorail and etc.,
Yeah.
how they all interchange is important, right? Again, if I talk about global best practices, once I'm in the public transport system, I don't necessarily have to move out of a controlled environment and then move again into a controlled environment. It is all seamless where one ticket works on the other and I can just swipe my way
Yes.
through a digital token or something like that. That there is room for improvement, right? So, because different authorities are building different components of this, you are essentially having to buy tickets of different, let's say my journey has 3 or 4 components. I have to buy tickets of those 4 components. And then there's a transition time, which is not seamless. So ultimately, end-to-end travel time is almost the same or sometimes higher. So I understand that there is a plan in place, specifically in Mumbai, where all this integration is being
Yeah.
thought of and being implemented. And if this last mile connectivity, multimodal integration, digital ticketing, all of that is now put in place, yes, that the objective of reducing the cost and reducing the end-to-end travel time and reducing the inconvenience or effort from going from point A to B. If these three things are met, I think that would be a case study in itself, right? If we are able to see this getting implemented over the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. I mean, the downside of that would be that Bombay will probably face a little bit of pollution, in the coming few years and all, because the construction activity has picked up so much. So hence, that's a little bit of a downside. My last question to you would be in terms of YCP actors overall. If you could give us a brief in terms of the major projects you probably are engaged with, and in the future, in the next 1 or 2 years, like where is your organization would sort of gravitate towards, or what are the plans actually?
Yeah, so we've been in the transportation and transit practice for the last 2 decades almost, right? And we have seen the evolution of modernization and upgradation of airports and all kinds of transit rail, starting from DMRC initial metro lines to now people looking at bullet trains and rapid rail, etc. Right? So we've seen how the landscape has evolved. I think our area of focus is essentially what can we do to make these projects viable. That is that is the problem that we want to solve, right? And there are two components of any transport system. There is the fare revenue,
Yes.
and then there's a non-fare revenue. Both these need to come together at the right time to make the project viable, not just from a initial financing perspective, but also from an operations perspective. So one of the key things that we are doing, and we are working with Delhi Metro, Mumbai Metro, Bangalore Metro, and a lot of these other metro authorities, is that how can we enhance ridership and how can we enhance non-fare revenue? So just to give you an example of one of the main things that we are pursuing at this time is about creating a non-fare revenue platform for the metro networks. For example, let's take the example of, let's say, Delhi Metro. Over a long period of time, a lot of lines have been commissioned. As a result, lot of advertisement rights, co-branding rights, retail and F&B, telecom rights, optic fiber, a lot of these licenses have been given out to various vendors. Right? Same case with Mumbai, in Bangalore, anywhere where you have a large network, Hyderabad, and so on. Now, what has happened is it's led to a lot of fragmented kind of licenses. And if I take the example of, let's say, advertisement or co-branding, you
Right.
have like 10 licensees who have the license for different parts of the entire network, who go to the same brands and the same media buyers and undercut each other on prices to get the ad spend or the ad revenues.
Right.
This is leading to cannibalization. It's a commodity which is being formed, and the overall pie itself is shrinking because of this. So what needs to happen is some consolidation of this, making it into a platform where you give exclusive rights to one credible agency or a few, one or two agencies, depending on how big the network is. What will happen is they will be able to hold on to their rates. The pie
Right.
increases because these authorities have revenue share. The share to the metro increases. This platform can later be monetized. There are global examples of how people have taken it public, an IPO of this non-fare platform,
Mm.
then subsequent primary and secondary offerings to raise finance for further expansion and also to cover a little bit of your operating losses, annual losses. So once this platform is created, it takes care of a lot of firstly contractual and contract management issues, but it also provides you a source of fundraising for covering operating costs and also for further expansion. And that is one of the big projects we are working on. And during the rail show, the ET rail show, we are releasing a white paper on this topic, right? We hope that this will get picked up. We've already spoken to a few authorities about it, and we have got some positive responses. So this is a
Right.
primary agenda for us, which is to make transport projects viable in the long term.
All right. So, Mr. Shadab, really, appreciate you, taking your time out and joining us out there and giving this very sort of elucid framework in terms of how's the TOT, what are the things we need to do with the urban transport system, and in terms of the revenue assurance that our larger transport authorities need to make sure that all the systems are sort of viable. So, I really appreciate you joining us, and
And
thank you very much.
finally, what I would like to say here is that while we are building all of this, We want to give this as a gift to our future generations, right? What we don't want to give is a lot of debt to be serviced to the future generations. So we want a healthier environment because public transport is much cleaner than private transport. So that transport shift to public transport, an efficient, sustainable public transport, and something that will not burden the future governments and future generation in terms of footing the cost for it. So that's the problem that we intend to solve. And yeah, we are all learning and look forward to some good developments in this space.
Right. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dev. Thanks for your time.